Hello, my name is Carrie Varela, and I'm the owner and founder of the Reiki Healing Society. I feel super honored and grateful to be sitting here with Michaela Daystar, the founder of Heartscapes Reiki. And together we wanted to explore the topic of being true to our way and navigating the role of integrity within our Reiki practice. So today, and over a series of 6 different videos, we're going to talk about this topic in depth. And today is just an opportunity for us to get to know each other and share a little bit about why this topic really matters to both Michaela and myself. So before we begin, I just really want to give Michaela an opportunity to share a little bit more about Heartscapes Reiki and her business.
Yeah, thanks, Carrie. It's so fun to be finally getting together to do this. We've been in this conversation together for quite some time, and it's been really joyful to see how it's developed in our conversations, and I'm excited to share that out. So welcome to Heartscapes Reiki, or welcome back if you're one of the folks who's been with me on my channel for a bit. Heartscapes is a Reiki studio in Davis, California, and we like to play at the intersection of self-reflection, spiritual practice, and social action. And we really are joyful to work with folks who are very committed to your contribution to the world, to that unique thing that is yours to contribute to your family, to your community, and to the world, and who want to do that and explore that from the inside out through the lens of a practice that is simple and accessible and can bring us to some really deep places. So that's part of what we play with here at Heartscapes, which has a lot of intersection with what you are up to over at Reiki Healing Society. So I'd love to hear you share a little bit about Reiki Healing Society and what you're up to over there.
Well, thank you so much. Well, we have a lot of similarities in our businesses, which is really awesome and so great to meet a similar soul on a similar journey. But I'd love to share a little bit about Reiki Healing Society. So Reiki Healing Society is a seed that I planted back in 2020, but it has its roots back all the way to 2013. And the Reiki Healing Society helps people heal and thrive through Reiki and yoga. The Reiki Healing Society is dedicated to creating a cultural and ideological shift within Reiki, which is grounded in the roots of Reiki, inspired by nature. And we seek to empower, validate, and honor each of us on our own unique journey of healing, oneness, and spirituality. The Reiki Healing Society is a safer, trauma-informed community that's inclusive to both BIPOCs and LGBTQIA individuals. The Reiki Healing Society is a platform where many can lead. We're built on the foundation of community, collaboration, and giving back. Our emphasis on community includes business skills and personal development training for existing Reiki practitioners. And we also help serve those who are seeking to transform from a student of Reiki into a practitioner. The model of the Reiki Healing Society is collaborative. So similar as we're taking time together to explore both of our businesses through this YouTube series of videos. Reiki Healing Society is an attempt to do that with a lot of different individuals. And in particular, we're looking to collaborate with handcrafted Reiki-inspired artists or artisans. And we love to feature your work on our website and Etsy page. So in the link in the description of this video, you can provide a submission for review. And if accepted, Reiki Healing Society will feature your products and or art for sale on our site.
That's really exciting. And it's also, really inspiring to see those places where our overlaps come together around supporting Reiki practitioners and supporting those who, want to step through this practice as a lifestyle, as a way of life, whether that's a way of life for themselves personally, for or with others in a professional setting, however that shows up in our lives. We want to be a place where people get the support, the learning, and the practice that they need. So that really led us to this conversation about integrity. And it really started with conversations about cultural appropriation, didn't it? and conversations around how you and I have kind of navigated the question of how can we be in more integrity within our Reiki practice, um, around being more connected to the Japanese roots of this practice. And so I wondered if you wanted to talk a little bit about, why this matters, why this conversation feels important to share, not just between us, but to bring out to those that we're connected to in this way. So, yeah, why does this matter?
Absolutely. Well, it matters in a lot of ways. I mean, it matters on like just a surface level, of course, like, as anybody wants to do, I want to succeed in what I'm doing professionally. And I think having integrity is one of the greatest ways to, make sure I'm on that trajectory of success. So, there's that first level. But I think when I think back to integrity, it really takes me back to my whole story with Reiki. And as I mentioned, the Reiki Healing Society also has this kind of yogic element to it, and that comes from my background. I'm found yoga when I was 16, and I had something which I could only describe as like I've heard it described as the beginner's mind, and it's concept within Buddhism. And Thich Nhat Hanh, he described this idea of the beginner's mind
Mhm.
was when he was a young kid and he saw um, an image of the Buddha, and something like deep inside him moved.
Mm.
And a few years later, he committed his whole life to be in the Buddhist tradition. And not to say like my journey is that spectacular or anything like that, but when I first experienced yoga, I felt deeply moved by the practice, and it inspired me on a lifelong journey with yoga. And in about 14 years ago, I started a yoga teacher training, and then during that time, I also discovered Reiki.
Mm.
And basically, ever since 2011, I've been practicing both of these modalities together as my profession. And some of us might be familiar with this conversation about cultural and spiritual appropriation that actually has been sparked within yoga.
Yeah.
And I can offer just a quick definition of what it means if you're unfamiliar.
Great.
But the definition we could use is from Maisha Johnson. And she describes it as a particular power dynamic in which members of a dominant culture take elements from another culture of people who have been systemically oppressed by that dominant group. And cultural appropriation can also include profit. So members of a dominant culture are almost always have the ability to profit off what they've stolen from another culture, and providing no compensation back to those oppressed cultures. And I don't think we mentioned it yet already, but this whole topic of integrity within Reiki and within our practice, it can be very triggering, as well as a conversation around social and spiritual appropriation. It's an
Yeah.
incredibly triggering topic. And so if you're listening today, I just want you to like surround yourself in a safe container with which to really explore some of the edges of how our dominant culture, how that has a systemic effect on the world around us.
Yeah.
And then same too with this concept of integrity. It's something that Michaela and I both like really grappled with, I think, and I won't speak for Michaela, but in our own personal life. And it's not to say on this call or on this video that we're in more integrity than you are. I think most Reiki practitioners actually bring a lot of integrity to their practice. But nevertheless, this conversation around integrity was one that we felt like was really juicy to explore.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that we had in common is that and this was particularly, I found to be true for myself when I thought about, why is this topic important to me, is that over the years that I've been, deeply investigating for myself, what does it mean to be in integrity with my practice? And that began with being in integrity with my connections to the Japanese origins of Reiki. As a white woman practicing a Japanese spiritual tradition, I spent the first few years of my practice being completely disconnected from those origins, like not understanding why elements of the system were what they were, where they came from, which elements were Japanese and which elements were not, that had come in from other places, that had been kind of melting potted together. Um, and there was a certain point that that just felt out of integrity. It just felt like I wasn't, personally, culturally connected with what I was doing, and that was impacting whether or not I could even be effective for myself or for others, and whether or not I could, continue to work in the modality. Um, Similarly, I also had the perspective for quite some time that Reiki was about doing for others. It was about, extending myself out to other people, as opposed to something that is primarily for and about myself. And when I came to terms with that reality, that Reiki as a practice from its origins was always inherently about the self and about the journey of the self, to remember the wholeness of our true self, it really became a challenge and a welcomed one. And I love how you talked about, the willingness to work at our edge, right? Our edge of comfort, our edge of what we know and what we've already experienced. Because I really had to live on that edge for quite some time. Um, Really looking at the fact that, if I can't take time to, clear away the things about myself that are causing harm to myself and others, the parts of myself that are not in compassion, the parts of myself that are lazy and not willing to do the work, right? And only want to, do something for others, but not, do that same thing for myself. The more that I went through that journey, and at the same time, learned about those origins, like learned where Reiki came from, why it is what it is. Um, in other words, came into greater integrity with my practice. That's when I was finally able to actually be the practice, right? So I was finally able to be true to my way, to live as an embodiment of the Reiki precepts, which is really the purpose of the system, and be able to model that for others in a way that was actually valuable to them, as opposed to trying to pretend I was something that I wasn't. So this conversation about integrity, from the perspective of our own stories, right? From the perspective of wanting to share those places where we had to grapple and had to struggle. Um, my hope is that this can, provide a little bit of an invitation for others who may be watching to do some of that investigating for themselves, to maybe, walk a little bit of this journey, continue walking the journey they already have begun, and to notice the places where they have already done some of this work, right? Where they are already, living in these ways, and to celebrate that. So that's what I'm really excited to invite folks into, and to, be vulnerable enough to open ourselves up to a wider conversation, right? Because this conversation's been between the two of us and, other people in our circle that we've been talking with. And, so I want to acknowledge it takes some vulnerability to kind of open this question about integrity to a wider conversation. So we really do welcome people to contribute and to comment and to ask questions and share your own experiences, challenge us, let us know when we're still, we're still tripping over our own feet.
Yeah.
Really letting this be an open space, not a one directional conversation.
Absolutely. And yes, I think it's just such a timely conversation. And I think ultimately, if I go back to like some of my motivation, is that like I have such a passion and commitment to Reiki. And what has been really just wonderful about this conversation, it's really sparked something that I've always wanted, which was to connect on a deeper level to Reiki's roots and back to a more traditional approach to teaching and practicing Reiki. It's certainly something that like has been on my bucket list in life for a long time, and I feel really grateful that it's now really the top property, or it's like top priority for me to be doing this in my practice. And I think we can speak to a little bit of the fruits of this practice, which is,
Yeah.
when you create greater integrity within your practice, and we're going to hit it on a lot of different levels.
Yep.
Um, this like feeling of inner peace has returned so fully for me.
Mhm.
And so I go to sleep at night feeling just better about myself, better about what I'm doing professionally, and knowing that I am at least making an attempt to make the world a better place through Reiki
Absolutely.
practice, which is always something that has been important to me. And, it was a real moral crossroads for me when I learned about this topic of social and spiritual appropriation, is that, like, perhaps by me practicing Reiki or yoga and inadvertently is creating oppression for other people.
Mm,
And that was unimaginable for me. It really struck to the core of, um, you know, my moral trajectory. And so what I feel so grateful about is, once I've explored it on all of these different levels, the benefit has been this tremendous state of inner peace, a
absolutely.
reconnection to peace. So maybe let's talk about that. We're going to break down this conversation a little bit over the course of a few more videos. And so, Michaela, do you want to start off on our first topic, which is being true to your way, navigating the role of integrity for yourself?
For yourself. Yeah. So we want to just quickly just name the 6 topics that we'll be focusing on in these videos to just whet your appetite. So we will be beginning with a video about integrity within our own self practice. And so, as I said, Reiki was and is primarily a practice for self. That when we're sharing Reiki with others, it's because of the overflow from our own self practice. And so we're going to talk about our own journeys into self practice, what that's meant for us, and why that's brought greater integrity for our practice. From there, we're going to be moving outward from the self.
Yeah. So the next video will be about culture, a little bit more about cultural appropriation. We just gave you like a little nugget of what it is, but we'll unpack it a lot more in a lot more depth and how it applies to Reiki. So be looking for that video. And then the next video will be on Reiki for others. So do you want to talk a little bit more about that one, Michaela?
Yeah. So we're moving from the interpersonal to the intrapersonal. What does it mean to be in integrity when we are working with other folks, when we're sharing Reiki with others? And there's a lot of ways that that conversation could be approached. There are certain things within the culture of Reiki practitioner communities that speak to this. Some of which I might challenge a little bit, and some of which we might introduce some new ideas. But one in particular that we want to talk about is the importance of developing a trauma-informed lens in our work, what that is and why it matters, and how others can do so. From
So,
there, we're going to shift more towards the entity that is the business of Reiki for those who are choosing to make Reiki their business.
yeah, and so one of the things that I really am inspired to talk about is just the role of integrity within business. It really actually comes back to that conversation about the self. And there's a lot of debate within Reiki whether or not you should charge for your services or not. And again, this topic is about being true to your way. So each one of us and our way and our journey through life is different. So there's a lot of different ways that you can handle that. But what I would argue is, for the most part, a lot of people in Reiki, and I'd say people, but I want to point more in particular towards women, because there's a huge majority of our community is women, is that we have a discomfort for charging what our time is worth.
Mhm.
And so the piece around integrity here is really being clear about how much you should be charging for your services and why. And I think when you get really grounded in that conversation of what your time is worth, and what you're giving through Reiki, and being really clear to the universe to give yourself back what you put into it, I think you'll find that you'll just really blossom in your business. So I'm really looking forward to that video.
Absolutely. Yeah, our relationship with money is such a important piece of how we move through our world as practitioners. And speaking of the world, we're going to move from business into what it means to have integrity between ourselves as practitioners and the world, in particular through the lens of social and environmental interactions. And so here we'll get to talk about, how is it that we consume through our business, through our practices? How are we tending to the land on which we live? How much do we know about the First Nations people whose land we are in practice on? And what's our relationship with those folks in our communities. We'll get to talk about nature and our relationship with nature as practitioners and the connection between Reiki and nature. Reiki is a nature-based practice from its origins. And so how we engage with the natural world around us, how we give back to that world through the workings of our businesses and our practices really matters in terms of how we move through this world in integrity. So we'll dig into that a little bit. And then we will close out this series by talking about having integrity with Reiki itself. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, and I'm so excited about that conversation too, because I think here's what is often a struggle, I think, is that, there's this idea of showing respect to Reiki. And I think that is actually very multifaceted. And in a Western style of Reiki, we might approach showing respect as simply like maybe not tattooing the symbols on our body or not showing the symbols to others. And I really have no conflict with anybody who's tattooed a symbol on their body. I think, we'll unpack that in greater depth. But nevertheless, the idea of showing respect for Reiki, I think that really comes down to, especially if you're teaching Reiki to others, is having respect for the lineage of Reiki and respecting that your role as a teacher is to transmit Reiki as purely as you possibly can to the next 7 generations of practitioners beyond you. And so for me, respect for Reiki really includes a conversation around, am I speaking what's true about Reiki, or am I speaking to my own spiritual? And I think there's a lot of blurred lines there within Reiki is kind of notorious for, having widely variant Reiki trainings that cover widely variant different topics. And so ultimately, what I'll point to in that conversation is that respect for Reiki really starts from knowing what Reiki is. And being very clear about what Reiki is and creating a consensus amongst Reiki practitioners as to what it is. Because I think I see a lot of dialogue around saying like, Reiki is whatever it is that you want it to be. And I really struggle with that because I think Reiki is a very concrete, specific ideology. And if you're transmitting Reiki to others as a teacher, I think it's really important to know that and make sure that you're doing your best to transmit that on to your students.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, Reiki comes from a specific time, a specific place, a specific context, a specific culture. It's not anything, it's something very specific. So I'm really excited for these conversations. So the way that we'll be presenting these is they will be housed on our 2 different channels. So half of them will be housed on Heartscapes Reiki, half of them will be housed on Reiki Healing Society, and we'll have links to both of those to cross-pollinate so that you can hop back and forth and keep up with the conversation. Really invite you to interact with those conversations, to bring your own thoughts and ideas and experiences and build something bigger together as we go through it. So Carrie, I'm super looking forward to it. And we'll be getting working on these right away.
We'll be rolling up our sleeves and ready to get really deep into it. So check out the first video, that concept about navigating integrity for yourself. That's going to be on Michaela's Heartscapes channel.
Yep.
So thank you so much for joining us on this conversation. And we hope it brings you a lot of benefits and gives you, again, that connection to greater integrity and all of the fruits that come from it.
Absolutely.
So, see you again next time.
All right. And until we do, may you be provisioned for your journey. Bye-bye.